from the capital city of Charleston, West Virginia, this is Inside West Virginia Politics with Mark Curtis. Inside West Virginia Politics is brought to you by AARP West Virginia, your ally for real possibilities in the Mountain State.
Good Sunday morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Inside West Virginia Politics. I'm Mark Curtis, along with my co-host, Adrian Robbins. Good to have you with us this Sunday morning. There has been a lot of news, a lot of headlines of late about suspicious deaths at the VA hospital in Clarksburg, West Virginia. We want to focus on that for a couple of segments this morning. I want to introduce Tony Odell, who is an attorney here in Charleston, who is now representing 5 of the families.
That's correct, Mark.
Wow. There have been reports that we are seeing upwards of, there may be 11 deaths, there may be more. What's your latest understanding of how many suspicious deaths are being looked at? 2 have so far been classified as homicides, the others have not yet.
That's correct. So there were 9 confirmed. I've actually talked with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they have 9 cases that they have in their office. And I've been contacted by 2 families who are not on that list, but the OIG has in fact contacted them. So there's at least 11 cases they're looking into.
When were you first made aware that something was going on up at the VA in Clarksburg?
Well, I was contacted by a lawyer named Harry Disler, who actually had the case, but he was completely piled under with some work he was doing in the Parkersburg area. So he brought me in because it was a malpractice case and it was also a federal tort claims case. So I think I met with Miss Proctor back in May of 2019. But she asked me to kind of sit on the case for a little bit because she didn't want to do anything to hamper the investigation.
I think it's important that we mention the names of the victims in this case because these aren't ordinary deaths. These are people who served this nation in the military. The first name to come forward that you represent his family now, Sergeant Felix McDermott. He was an Army sergeant. George Nelson Shaw, who is being represented by someone else, he was in the Air Force. He was the second confirmed homicide. And now we have a third case, or a third family has gone public, the family of Navy veteran John Holman. I believe you represent them as well.
That's correct.
Let's start with the McDermott case. I mean, what raised suspicions there?
Well, the first thing that raised suspicion was the FBI showed up at Miss Proctor, who's the daughter and representative of the estate, showed up at her house and basically said, hey, we're investigating 9 or 10 of these suspicious deaths at the VA. We believe that your father fits into the category just because of how he died. And they asked to exhume his body, and they did exhume his body in October of 2018, and she got the report back in February of 19 that confirmed it was a homicide.
What are the commonalities in these cases that we're seeing? I had heard that all of the deaths had happened on floor 3A of the hospital, and all were due to improper injections of insulin. Some of these folks were diabetics, but most were not. Even one that was the diabetic did not take insulin. Are those the common threads right now that we know of?
The common thread is floor 3A, which is the only med-surg floor in the hospital where you actually, other than the ICU, where you can get acute care. So I think it has about 20 beds from what I've heard, private rooms, and the other thing that kind of brings all these together is the sudden drop in the blood sugar levels. So you've got people who have typically blood sugar levels that are running in the normal range, and all of a sudden they drop to just some unbelievably low number like 12, 10, which is just not natural.
Now, the senators have both demanded that this investigation end and end quickly. They want answers right now. Does it give you any red flags that this investigation has been going on for so long and these families have been left waiting?
No, I don't think so. I think that you're looking at a period of time when this employee would have worked at that hospital. And we don't know the exact time period, but we've heard it may have begun in late 2014, early 2015, and would have stopped sometime in early 2019. So if you've got 20 plus beds and you have all the deaths that have occurred there, so it seems to me this is a pretty daunting investigation. So they've got a lot of medical records to go through. They're still doing autopsies. There's actually an autopsy being performed right now on one of these cases.
I want to talk about one specific case where there can't be an autopsy or exhumation because your client or the gentleman was cremated. John Holman, you represent his family. He was in fact a diabetic, but what raised suspicions in his case in the fact that he's cremated? Is that proving difficulty in terms of trying to make that one a homicide as well?
Well, you know, it may be from the criminal standpoint. We have a different burden of proof in civil cases. So they're looking into it, obviously. He fit the pattern perfectly. He did not take insulin. He took a pill that was not insulin. And then all of a sudden he has this major unnatural drop in his blood sugar, which would not have occurred with his medication.
All right. Well, this is horrifying and fascinating at the same time. We're with attorney Tony O'Dell. He represents 5 families now involved in these suspicious deaths at the VA Medical Center, the VA Hospital in Clarksburg. We're going to continue our discussion after this short break. Stay with us on Inside West Virginia Politics.
Now back to Inside West Virginia Politics with Mark Curtis.
Welcome back to Inside West Virginia Politics. We're continuing our discussion on the deaths at the VA in Clarksburg. Of course, joining us now is Tony O'Dell, a lawyer for quite a few of these families. And I'd like to move on and talk a little bit about how much of the burden is on the hospital. Obviously, they're saying that this was an employee, but how much of that comes back to the hospital should have been taking care of these patients?
Well, first of all, you have this very unnatural drop in blood sugar that's leading to these people's deaths, and each one of those should have triggered a sentinel event at the hospital, and that's something that the hospitals, all hospitals, whether they're VA hospitals or CAMC or whatever hospital, and what it should trigger is a root cause analysis, a very detailed investigation into potential causes. And so I think this should have been caught a long time ago. We should have never gotten into where we're talking about 11 and perhaps even more, because I've got a feeling this will expand beyond 11, but we'll find out.
Yeah. Aside from the legalities in this case, I mean, at the gut level, there's just something that really sparks people's outrage over this. These are not just American citizens. These are people that serve their country in battle. I was telling you earlier, I look at this all different now because I have a stakeholder. My daughter's in the Army, and you look at it different. You go, these people deserve better than this. They fought for their country. How could they meet such a horrific death?
You know, if you look back in 2017, this hospital was found to have manipulated wait times for veterans and then covered it up. And then we now have all these deaths. The VA never came forward to any of these families. So you know, I think there is a culture of cover-up up there and malfeasance. And you know, I think things need to change up there. And I think we're seeing some stories around the country at other VA medical centers. Yeah, there's something wrong, and these guys do deserve the very best. These people, not just guys, but they deserve the very best, and they're not getting it.
As a lawyer, what would you say to some families out there who maybe had a family member that received care at Clarksburg VA and is now thinking back to that? Because I'm sure that it's hard not to think, what if something bad did happen to my family now?
Contact us, because we'll look into the case. We've had multiple calls we're looking into at this point. And we believe that some of our calls may end up resulting in more investigations. One of the calls had come into OIG, had not contacted them yet. And when I contacted the OIG, it turned out they were on the list. So I think there might be more out there, and we are definitely getting calls from a lot of people. So there's a way to investigate it, and you know, they're welcome to contact us.
This may be something you might not want to comment on, but I've got to ask about it. There's a petition drive out now started by some veterans and people supporting them in Clarksburg. They're trying to get Dr. Glenn Snyder, who's the head of the VA hospital in Clarksburg, removed. They're demanding his resignation. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I do think we have a culture cover-up up there. I think we've seen covering up these deaths until Mr. McDermott's family brought it forward, and then manipulating the times up there. There's something wrong, and it starts at the top of that VA medical center.
When you're talking about this many deaths, like you said earlier in the show, this is a huge investigation. We're talking about civil lawsuits. We're talking about possibly federal lawsuits. What comes next for you and the families that you represent?
We just have to keep filing our notice of claims. In order to bring a case against the U.S. government, you have to give them 6 months notice and file a claim, and you can't file a lawsuit until the end of the 6 months. So we're in the process of filing more of the claims. We've just got to wait our 6 months on the McDermott case, and it'll be the first one filed.
You know, no one knows the time frame on this. I mean, I assume you've talked to U.S. Attorney Bill Powell and talked to others, but and the U.S. senators, but we have no idea when this investigation is going to be, and it could be tomorrow, it could be 2 months from now. Do you have any sense of when the OIG is going to release its report?
I do not. I do know that Bill Powell was on the radio and said this was the beginning of the end of the investigation, and what that means, I really don't know. But at least I think they're figuring out a way to try to bring it to a close, or at least maybe have enough evidence to make an arrest and then continue their investigation beyond that.
I know you can't name the other families that you're representing yet because they don't want to go public, but are the circumstances pretty similar? All
3A, all a drop in the blood sugar, all contacted by the OIG with investigations going forward.
Just so sad and so disappointing to hear about.
Right. We're going to continue to follow this story, obviously, with 5 television stations that Nexstar operates in West Virginia, and the huge veterans population in the state. This is a major story. It's gotten CBS News nationally, the Washington Post, USA Today. This is a major national story. We're going to keep on top of it. We want to thank Attorney Tony O'Dell for joining us today to discuss this, and we'll have you back as things progress. Thank you, Tony.